he is one of the most cherished sports broadcasting icons that you've ever seen. It is Bill Macatee, started working network in his 20s and continues to do so. He is an idol of mine, a star, a man who has done so many different sports and continues to inspire. I'm Bryan Fenley, and I'm an anchor for Fox Sports Radio. And Bill, it is an absolute honor to have you on here, knowing how busy you are, and a man who took the time when I was in college to speak to me, to have a couple conversations with me when you didn't have to. You had 1,000 more things to do. For that, I just want to first of all open up and say how much I appreciate you.
Bryan, thank you very much. That was way too kind, that introduction. You actually were very close to a mentor of mine, the great Dick Enberg, who was one of the best broadcasters, but I think more importantly, one of the best people that I've ever had the pleasure to know in my adult life and in my career. And so it just seemed fitting. You know, you're such a great young guy, and you know, you were so enthusiastic about your future in broadcasting, and I recognized a lot of myself in you.
Oh.
And so it was a real pleasure to be able to spend some time with you, and I've been very pleased with your success. Congratulations.
Thank you, Bill. And you read my mind, because my first question was, what did Dick Enberg mean to you?
Yeah, he meant a lot. So I went to NBC when I was 26 years old. I'd done local news in Beaumont, Texas, then Kansas City, then Dallas. And NBC hired me when I was 26. Dick was at the height of his career and would continue at that level for a number of years after that. But, you know, he was one of those guys in a very competitive business, as you know, who never seemed to be concerned about that. He was more concerned about the humanity and trying to be helpful. And I know when NBC approached me about doing the NFL, I had never done NFL play-by-play, and so Dick said, "Why don't you come out, spend some time with my wife Barbara and I at our place outside of San Diego, and I'll give you a seminar on how to do play-by-play." So I spent 2 or 3 days with Dick and Barbara in their home, and we played tennis, and then we'd do little seminar sessions, and Dick showed me how he prepared his boards, and just, you know, how we watched tapes and how you would broadcast a game. And I was totally overwhelmed. And, but it was such a generous gesture. And it's not one that a lot of people, you know, you're very insecure.
Sure.
People tend to be in this role, because there are, you know, young people who are very talented like yourself coming up through the ranks, and they push those established folks, right? And so there's a real ego factor for most people in this business. And so you know, not everybody does what Dick Enberg did. And I had always remembered that, and then went on to work with Dick and calling tennis and a number of things. I was in a hosting role at the US Open. He was the main play-by-play guy when he came over from NBC. And we would go out to dinner all the time. And I was always struck by, obviously a wonderful human being, but he would remember, you know, he would remember how great the telecast was. He would remember the little tiny mistake that no one else noticed.
Oh, gosh.
You know, and I recognize that in myself too. So I was the same way. But it was just such a wonderful thing to experience, to get to know him. And he and I have to say, you know, one of my contemporaries, Jim Nance, is also a role model for me. You know, I love the way Jim works. He's totally dedicated to his craft. He's amazingly good at it. He has to be one of the best people to ever sit in a broadcasting chair in sports. And he's, again, a better guy off camera than he is on camera, believe it or not. He's a great guy on camera. So I've tried to take some of that into the way I, you know, work with people, and not, you know, obviously I'm pretty sure that you could find some cases where I wasn't perfect, but I always aspired to be better and learn from those folks, Pat Summerall and some others along the way. because it's a stressful business. What you're doing,
Mm.
you're under a microscope and under pressure, and you're dealing with a lot of people who are also trying to do their best. But
Sure.
live sports is a whole other animal, and I've tried to explain it to now that I'm working in the investment world. I try to explain it to my friends, and it's a totally different language and
Yeah.
culture and everything. You just can't. But it can be intense, but you never want to lose your humanity. And Dick Enberg was, and Jim Nance as well, just classic examples of the right way to go about things.
Bill Macatee is with us. Both of those men you mentioned have unmistakable voices. You do as well. How would you describe the way your voice sounds?
I people have been nice enough to say that, because I'll be talking to my wife and somebody at the table next door with that guy, so it's clearly distinctive. But I honestly don't. I don't think there's anything special about it, and so I'm happy that that it's recognizable. But Dick Enberg had a cadence, and oh my, and what he said, and Jim as well, and he's become synonymous with these huge events that he does, everything from the Masters to Super Bowls, and the March Madness and the NCAA championship. I mean, he's an amazing broadcaster, and he'll be able to do this for a long, long time. But I actually don't really think my voice is anything special. Thank you for saying that.
Bill, I think you're being humble because your voice reminds me of something nostalgic, but also timeless. And it's just this warm, reverberating tone to it that I love. And you're about to go into your 30th Masters. You started what, in 1991?
Yeah.
How do you imagine what the Masters is going to look like this November, unlike anything you've ever seen before?
Yeah, it'll be very different. Well, let's just talk for a moment about sports broadly. I mean, the French Open is going on as we do this, and it's November. I mean, it's October, and it's fall, and people are all dressed up, and they're cold. And I just was talking to a friend of mine who Ken Solomon from Tennis Channel a few minutes ago, and he was saying it's really chilly. So it's a whole different cadence. That they just played the PGA Championship, and then they played the U.S. Open at an odd time, and it just feels the Stanley Cup. It's just that the cadence is so odd for sports, and so I'm not quite used to that. So as it relates to the Masters, I've been lucky enough to be there a couple times in November at Augusta National, and you just don't have the flowers in bloom, but the rest of it looks beautiful. Now the ball flies different in cold weather, so that could be that will be a factor depending on how cold it is. But the flowers not being in bloom, that's such a big part of the Masters, the beauty, because it was a nursery when it was bought, and Dr. Alistair McKenzie and Bobby Jones, with an assist from Chairman Clifford Roberts, sort of created this timeless treasure that's constantly been evolving. But the flowers have been a big part of it, so it will definitely be unusual for folks to see it this way.
Bill, what is your green jacket moment at Augusta? A moment you wish you could recreate?
Well, I was lucky enough. So when I grew up, my heroes in sports were Mickey Mantle, Johnny Unitas, and who's a quarterback for the Baltimore Colts, and Arnold Palmer. And so, as luck would have it, I got to interview Arnold in Butler Cabin on USA Network. It was a Friday finish. He wasn't going to make the cut. But I got to interview him after his 50th and final Masters. And so it was a very powerful moment for me, because he was a part of my youth. My dad was a big Arnold. We shared that love of this great player, and somebody that everybody loved. And so that our producer Lance Barrow said, "Here's the great man's day." And I don't know, at this point, is this 30 seconds, 30 minutes? I don't know what it is. I haven't seen it, because it's like TV sports. It's on the fly. So I start talking. I'm describing, the scene, and it's hole after hole of people standing and applauding, and him going over and shaking hands and hugs and kisses, and little kids, and it was just so beautiful. And I was almost having an out of body experience. I'm listening to myself in Butler Cabin describe my hero. And, now you're not really, you have some thoughts ahead of time, but at a certain point, that's all done, so you're talking. And so I remember saying things like, one of the reasons we loved Arnold Palmer is he was never Arnold Palmer. He was always one of us, and
Yes.
that kind of thing. And then, so I'm talking, and then I'm aware that someone has sat down beside me. And so I'm so locked in on the monitor, but I look over and it's Arnold, and he's crying, listening to this.
Oh.
And I, even as I say this now, I get goosebumps. But to be able to represent all of the people in sports who loved this iconic figure, truly iconic figure that transcended sports, and to say thank you from all of us, that was a pretty powerful moment that I'll never forget.
Because Bill, you are the best in the business at capturing raw emotion. You have this way about you where the golfers at Butler Cabin are so comfortable with you. And when you're meeting with them on Sunday, a lot of these guys are just missed winning this thing. And so you've got the fact that they're dealing with all sorts of pressure. They're coming into you and they know that perhaps they had just missed an opportunity by a very small margin to win it. And you have to try to get good sound out of them. When they come to you beyond what Arnold Palmer meant to you and what you were able to capture from him, what are other instances with golfers where they really let their guard down with you when you met with them post round on Sunday?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to do that role with Peter Costas for about 20 years. And, my dad, because I was grumbling about something and an interview hadn't gone as the way I wanted it to. And I was complaining to my dad, and he made the point you just did, Bryan, when he said, just remember, son, that everybody you talk to on Sunday in their minds just lost the Masters.
Yeah.
And that context really helped me understand. And my role, my position, and philosophy in these things has always been, I don't want a gotcha moment. I'm not there to make them feel bad.
Yes.
I want them to say whatever they feel is appropriate. There are topics I have to cover,
Sure,
because that's a part of it. But I worked very hard to try to make them feel at ease and to give them the room to say whatever they were feeling. Some people, they're able to unpack generally their emotions and they can convey those emotions. Others never get there because they're not wired that way. And so you have to understand what those folks are capable of. And the very fact that they're standing there after this tough moment for them, with golf is very intense, as you know. And so the very fact they're even standing there says something about them. The final interview I did in that role was with Jordan Spieth after Jordan had his difficult collapse at the 12th hole. And here was a young man who I think the world of. And every time I'd interviewed him before, even in defeat, he had steely eyes and he was very focused. And in that interview, he looked lost. And I don't blame him. I mean, he had not been able to process everything that had just occurred. And all I thought of in my head is I did not want him to start to tear up, because I felt like that is not how he would want to be presented. But there was only so much you could do right in that position. So I just tried my best to convey the empathy that all of us felt, right, in watching this young man who was always such a bright light and we always could root for easily, go through this very difficult time. So, yeah.
Emotionally, how have you felt impacted by your relationship with Roger Federer and getting to see him grow the way he has, being able to get to know him well, interviewing him, and the effect that he's had on you all these years?
Yeah, I tell you, there are athletes you come across that are really special in it's rare, but in many ways, and that's Roger. And he is a if there was a crowded room and he was in front of you, he would start to talk to you, and you would feel like, gee, Roger Federer is my best friend. And it's not disingenuous. I mean,
Yeah.
he's able to because he genuinely is a caring person. I've done a few events with him when he's asked me to do something that was out of respect for other players that were there, and and made a suggestion. Could you do it this way? And he was absolutely right. So I've been lucky in my career, which is winding down, but to be around for the end of McEnroe and Connors. Jimmy Connors coming from 2 sets and 2 breaks down against Patrick McEnroe at the U.S. Open was my first big tennis match. And then I was lucky enough to call 10 singles finals of the U.S. Open, including Serena's first major. And I got to watch, Andre, and I got to watch Michael Chang and the great American group that was there, Roger and Rafa throughout their evolution, Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi throughout their careers as well. So that you could make the case that this is definitely one of the golden periods of the sport. And I got a front row seat for all of it. And a lot of times sitting by John McEnroe or Martina Navratilova or Lindsay Davenport, some quality person like that, because I don't play tennis. I've watched a lot of it, but I don't play it, so they could explain to me what was going on and how extraordinary it was.
Bill, you've been blessed, but you have deserved everything you've gotten by how genuine you are, how hard you work, and the charm that you give over the air. My last question for you here, and Bill Macatee is with us, I'm Bryan Fenley, is how do you stay busy now? You touched upon it a little bit earlier in the interview, but give us a sense of what it's like for you, because you're still doing a couple events. You're going to do the Masters. You'll do the French Open down the road again. But what are you doing also on top of that?
So I work I have for the last 8 years an investment firm in Chicago. So we have 20 portfolio companies in education, healthcare, and there's a little bit in financial services. But I work closely with a couple of our education companies. So I'm very involved. One of them is an online education, primarily in graduate studies, supporting tier 2 and 3 state institutions. So that's been really interesting. And it's funny because I had the job that all my friends would love to have. I want to go to Super Bowls. And on top of everything else, I was a sports correspondent for the Today Show for 6 years. So even if I wasn't broadcasting the event, I got to go and do interviews and that kind of thing. So it is the job everybody wants, and they do not understand why I'm excited about what they call a boring business meeting. But because it's new and because I'm sitting in the room with a lot of really smart folks, and speaking a language that I'm out over my skis 24/7. I barely understand what they're talking about most of the time, but it's been great to learn. And at my age, to learn something new, to be challenged by something new is really a lot of fun. So I'm enjoying it immensely.
Well, I have enjoyed this interview with you, and I hope our paths cross again soon. I cannot wait, Bill, to watch you at the Masters later on this year. And I'm so grateful for your friendship. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks so much for having me.